Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Lil Dudes Insect Academy podcast. I'm here in Washington, D.C. at the ESA conference this year, and I'm across the table from my friend Stéphanie. Welcome to the show, Stéphanie. I'm so excited for you to be here.
Thank you so much.
So welcome to the show. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
You. So yes, hi, I'm Steph, and so I am a Canadian, so your neighbors from up north.
Yes.
I'm from Montreal, so Canada, and I'm at McGill University, and so I'm studying currently plant pollinator network interactions, investigating what wildflowers and what wall pollinators are present along mostly agricultural farms, specifically cranberry farms, and then seeing how these interact and how these might contribute to pollination services for the agricultural industry as well.
Wait, before we get started, I just wanted to say thank you for tuning into this episode of the Lil Dudes Insect Academy podcast, and just ask you to please hit the like button below or click the subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube, or follow this podcast if you are listening. That really helps the show out. But also, if you want to help us further, then join our Patreon. We have an awesome community that is growing there. Or if you want to make a one-time donation, we are a nonprofit foundation. So head to our website. Both the Patreon and the website will be linked down below. But without further ado, back to the episode. Wow, yeah, we'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. But first, let's talk about your schooling. Where did you go? Where are you in that process? And what were some of the things you worked on with that?
Yes, absolutely. So I, early on, always was a big geek, always a big science nerd. That was always my strong suit, so elementary, all of that. And in Quebec, at least, the schooling system is a bit different. So we have a little 2-year kind of like college experience that's between high school and university to get students kind of more acclimated to, more academic life and things of the sort. And that's really when my kind of nerd brain finally exploded and was stimulated. I was finally very happy to be studying environmental biology.
Nice.
I was very privileged to have 2 fantastic teachers that were both biologists and that really confirmed that this is what I wanted to do for a living. And they both happened to be entomologists. And so prior to that, I always knew that I liked sciences, I always knew I liked the environment, but I had never thought of entomology before. And even I would go even far as to say I didn't particularly like bugs all that much. So I was always a plant nerd, always thought I was going to go in botany, and I kind of just fell into entomology, and I love it now, and it's super exciting. And when I went to university afterwards, I did my undergrad in ecology, and so I always liked plant insect interactions, and I said, my background was in plants. So being able to then kind of transition into entomology, and so seeing how insects will benefit the plants and how they're pollinators and things of the sort really, really interested me. And then I had a bunch of other very cool teachers, again, at McGill, all entomologists that were all super cool. And I'm like, well, I don't know, you guys just seem really nice. I want to stick around. So I ended up, doing some volunteer work at different museums, things of the sort. And ever since then, I've just been in entomology.
Nice. Awesome. So, so let's talk a little bit more about, where you are now. Mm-hmm. What have you been working on recently? And go in depth into that for sure.
Yes. Okay. So my master's trajectory has been slightly unusual.
Yeah.
Most people did not go or do the steps that I did. So at the beginning, or sort of maybe I should say at the end of my undergrad, I was very passionate about Arctic ecology.
Okay.
So as a Canadian, I was always interested by our ecosystems up north, so the tundra and things of the sorts, the permafrost, understanding how these systems are frozen for such a long period of the year, but then there's still plants that are thriving, there's still insects that are thriving, and it was an ecosystem that I was always very attracted to.
Right.
And so started my master's, again, at McGill, stayed at the same university. It was through the transition of COVID, so it just seemed like the easier decision at the time.
Right.
And so I was studying just that. I was studying Arctic ecosystems. So for the first part of my master's, I was studying wolf spiders up in the high Yukon and Northwest Territories, and investigating how road disturbance might be affecting populations. And I loved my project. It was fantastic. It's what I presented to ESA last year.
Nice.
And it was wonderful. But things happen, and a change in supervision has led to me needing to kind of pivot my entire master's. So at the end of my first year, at the end of my second semester, a change in supervision led to me needing to abandon the project and start from scratch, which is
Oh,
sometimes
man.
very scary.
Yeah.
So new project, new supervisor.
Oh my goodness.
And I went back to my honors supervisors from my undergrad. I was like, hi, I am currently projectless. Can we work something out? And she gracefully took me under. So huge shout out to my wonderful supervisor, Dr. Jessica Gillen.
Nice.
And at the time, she had just gotten a big grant to study pollinators and plants in agricultural farms, on cranberry farms. And she said, well, I have a bunch of different students working on this. Her background is in more systematic, so evolutions and things of the sort, which I did some work on that as an undergrad, and I thought it was super cool, but that was never necessarily my calling. I always really liked ecology, understanding how things fit with one another in a system. So she's like, well, I'm actually missing an ecologist on my team, and I would love for someone to look at plant-insect interactions, which I know you seem to really like. You have a strong background in plants. Is that something you want to do? We want to understand the local biodiversity at these farms, understanding what wildflowers are there, what wall pollinators are there, how they interact, and then how they affect cranberry farms. And I was like, you know what? I will take it. And so I've recently been working on that only for the past few months, ever since June, and it has been wonderful. It's an all women's team also, so
that's awesome.
That is very cool, and I find a lot of pride in that. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So what are some of the things that you've found so far with that?
Ooh, oh my god, that's super cool. So I'm very early on right now in what we're doing, but there are a few things that I have been observing that I want to look into. So I can have a more precise answer for you next year, but at the moment, things that I have been noticing, especially along the floral edges, right? The whole point of having floral edges on farms is that monocultures lead to habitat homogenization. We know that. So having biodiversity hotspots allow for adequate shelter and adequate resources for the insects that are already present on the landscape.
Right.
And so when I was there looking at these floral edges, I saw a huge shift in the sort of floral community. So at the beginning of the field season, in the end of June, there's a high abundance in actinomorphic flowers. And so what I mean by that are they're flowers that are open just morphologically, and so they allow for a bunch of different insects to interact with them. So they're generalists, they're very easy access, a bunch of insects can interact with them. And there are zygomorphic flowers that are essentially the opposite. So those are flowers that have specialized structures that require an insect with specialized mouth parts to interact with them. And so over the field season in late June, those open flowers, so those actinomorphic flowers, were very, very abundant, and the zygomorphic flowers are almost not there. And then over the 4 weeks of our field season, those flowers were rapidly declining, but there was an equal rise in those specialized flowers. And so at the end and the beginning of the field season, the flowers were completely different. So I am curious in investigating how the insect community changes with that. Because exactly, maybe there's more lepidopterans towards the end of the field season because they have the proper proboscis, right, to interact with them and things of the sort. So I'm excited to look into that. And not only that, we also sampled, because these are agricultural farms, farmers will import and manage honeybees in order to ensure proper pollination of the cranberries within the beds.
Right.
And when we did our field work, the first week that we sampled was actually done before the arrival of honeybees. And honeybees are known to be very aggressive. They're very territorial.
Yep.
And they're known to sort of shoo away other pollinators that are present. And so because they have that before
sort of disruptive,
and after, exactly. And so seeing if they kind of have like a wrecking ball effect, and if they shoo away a lot of the native pollinators that are there and that are important, because the whole point would be to encourage the promotion of floral edges and, decrease mowing frequency and things of the sort. And then that way you can also decrease the need for managed honeybees. And so it's a way to promote native pollinators, and they do enough services that we don't need to be spending more money on managed honeybees. So that's what I observed, and now I want to see if there's an effect with that, looking at exactly network interactions.
Wow. Yeah. So there's a lot there. So you're big into the ecological aspect of it.
There you go.
Nice. Okay. So you basically are studying it all. Pollinators, butterflies, all of it. Well, butterflies are pollinators, but Yeah, so bees, butterfly, all of it.
Exactly. My thing was that I couldn't pick one. I couldn't choose. So
Yeah.
ecology was the perfect umbrella that just fits it all. And I get to do the math. I get to do the field biology. I get to do like the nitty gritty microscopy work as well. So it's nice because it's a little bit of everything, which was perfect for me.
That's great. Yeah, that's a great project because you kind of get experience. You get to figure out what you like and what you don't like. Yeah,
Exactly.
and I can tell you're very passionate about it and very excited. Yeah. So moving on to that, like I think that works into our next question pretty well, and that is like, how did you originally get into entomology specifically? Like, how did you manage to narrow that down?
Yes. So I think there is power in education because
Right.
There are very few entomology like courses, or even if in like wildlife courses or things of the sort, it's briefly mentioned in a lecture of like, oh yeah, insects are
Right.
important.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about polar bears again and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Which all insects or all animals are important, and unfortunately insects are just brushed off, and so even me, I never like thought to consider insects
Right.
as something that's important.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately as a little girl we're taught bugs are gross and you shouldn't be touching bugs, and
Right.
go look at the pretty flowers. And so my background was in plants partly because of that, and I was never particularly attracted to insects. And you know, for the first part of my career I was working with spiders. I had a huge fear of spiders when I was a little girl because exactly I felt like it's kind of indoctrinated in the way that we think. So originally I had to get over my own bias of like, well, insects are okay, but there's more important things out there to study. So
Yeah.
my mind started changing when I had those two biology teachers early on when I was 17, and I was like, whoa, you guys are cool, you guys are so passionate about what you do, and you're entomologists. I was like, huh, so maybe insects aren't all that bad.
Yeah.
And then when I started my undergrad at McGill, we had a course that's called Introduction to Insect Biology. I was like, you know what, that sounds super cool, I'll take that. And there was just so much material, and I'm a huge nerd. I love learning everything by heart. Like the more words you give me, like it's just I love that.
Yeah.
And so obviously learning all of the orders, all of the families, all of that, I was like,
Right.
oh my god, like it's never ending. And
Yeah.
with all of the letters I was
There's
seeing it as a
always more to
puzzle,
learn.
and
Yeah.
there's always more to learn. And so that course blew my mind, and absolutely fell in love with it, and again was very lucky to have an amazing teacher teach it.
Right.
And she's the curator of our museum, and we get to work together, and sort of like full circle moment. Now that I'm a grad student, I'm actually her TA for that course.
Nice.
And that was such a proudful moment. I was like, oh my god, like the course that got me into it, now I'm the TA. Oh, and
That's
so
awesome.
That was quite wonderful. So once I took that course, I emailed the professor and was like, hi, like my name is Steph. I loved your course so much. Is there anything that I could do, volunteer work at the museum? I really want to get involved in any way possible. And the professor, she's not a assistant prof in the department, she's a lecturer. And so she put me in contact with my current supervisor and was like, well, hey, there's this new assistant prof that just joined the department. She's actually
Right.
looking for students. Maybe you guys should talk. And we immediately hit it off. And then I was doing more like phylogenomics at the beginning, which was super interesting. I was like, but I don't think that that's what I want for grad school. But it was ultimately by having great teachers that got me over my ick of bugs, then taking a course and learning more about them and understanding just how cool they were, and not being shy to reach out. So I reached out to that prof, and then that prof put me in contact with my current supervisor. So that's ultimately how I got into it. And for a long time I was pushing, no, but I still want to do plants. I want to go back to plants, And just like the more I learn about insects, the more I'm just like, well, no, they like, now my heart's in there.
Yeah, well, and they're very related too. Like,
Yes,
the
exactly.
plant to insect interaction is endless, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my thing.
Yeah, that's really awesome. So, so you talked a little bit about those professors that pushed you along the way, but who are some other inspirational people in your life? Like, who's your inspiration, and who, like, whether you know them or not,
Absolutely.
like, who do you look up to, really?
Okay, so I will tap into sort of 16-year-old Steph's mind,
Yeah.
and I will have a two-part question answer to your question.
Yeah.
So I do not come from a highly educated family. I am the only member of my family to go to university, to have a BSc, to have a master's, to be pursuing a PhD. And so
Yeah.
I never necessarily envisioned myself to make it this far in academia, just because of like the people surrounding me.
Yeah.
And I think my ultimate hero, I have to say, is my mom. She was like, well, it's okay if we don't have a lot of money. It's okay if not everyone else in the family doesn't have a PhD. Just do you. Just do you. Just do your dream. You have the grades. You're smart. And oftentimes, especially if you come from a family like mine, it's always, I don't know, not frowned upon that you're educated, but it's always like, okay, like we get it. Like you're the one with the big degree and the big fancy name, and so it's always almost frowned upon, and like we always are seen as intimidated. My mom was like, don't listen to them. You keep pushing through the noise, and
That's
like
awesome.
you do you. You're a proud little nerd. So I'm very grateful for my mom, my dad as well. They always encouraged that side of me. They got me my first microscope, which was my favorite gift ever.
Yeah.
So big shout out to my parents. And then again, growing up, especially my dad introduced me to a lot of different TV shows, and early on I expressed interest for biology. So I remember, listening to Zaboomafoo and things of the sort. So the Kratz brothers.
Nice.
When I was a young kid, I was like, oh my god, I want to do what they're doing, like being outside and you get to like look at so I always wanted to be somewhat like them. And there's also a huge sort of like non-profit organization called Sea Shepherd that when I was quite young, I thought that they were so cool. So they basically help defend animal rights and specifically whale rights. So very far from entomology, but I just thought that they were so badass, just going out there and doing what it takes to protect the wildlife and sort of enforcing conservation plans and things of the sort. Those are always things that made me very driven and made me into the person that I am. I'm just like, I want to protect all of our beautiful wildlife. That's what I want to do. That's what I want to dedicate my life to. I want to help protect the planet. And I think we all start off saying like, I want to change the world, and that's how, I don't know, beautifully naive that is ultimately like my goal. And so one little scientist at a time, I think all together, especially at a big conference like this, we are impactful, and so it's nice to feel like I'm part of something bigger. So a lot of TV shows, and I'm very grateful for my parents that put me in contact with all of those that could open my eyes.
Yeah, that is so awesome. So what are some other hobbies and activities that you enjoy outside or attached to entomology?
Yes, that is a good question, and I think it's funny because I think I am very passionate about what I do, but I think I'm also a big adamant that your passion shouldn't necessarily be your work. You should do something that you absolutely love.
Right.
But when you sort of get into it, sometimes it's hard because there's always hardships that come with work. And so it's hard if your personal life is also really intertwined with it. Sometimes you can take certain blows very personally instead of just taking them professionally. So my hobby on the side is hiking. I'm a huge hiker, so if I'm not in my lab, you will find me on top of a mountain at an ungodly hour, way too early. I love starting hiking when it's super dark to see the sunset, the sunrise on top of the mountains. I'm a huge camper, hiking, all of that. I do road trips all the time. My vacations, I actually just did Seattle to San Diego a couple months ago.
Wow.
In 10 days, did all the national parks on the West Coast.
Nice.
Basically did the same thing in Canada, along the Yukon and British Columbia, and Eastern Canada. I'm a huge road tripper, hiker.
Nice.
That is definitely my thing.
That's awesome. Yeah, so speaking of travel, you're here at ESA in DC. What are you doing here? Like just hanging out, or did you have any talks to go to, or are you just hanging out for the week?
So, again, because of how early on I am in my project, and it was a transition that was fairly recent, just this summer at the beginning, my supervisor was like, don't feel like you have to do a poster, you don't have to do a presentation, just outreach and things like that, but I am stubborn and I exactly love what I do and I want to get it out there. So I did have a talk yesterday. So I participated in the 10-minute paper competition for grad students. I also did the same thing last year for the undergraduate level, and it went super well. I was very excited about that. So no, it is very nice to be able to give a talk. I love public speaking. Hopefully later in the future, I would like to go into teaching. So I always take every opportunity I can to go on a big stage, deal with the stress of presenting just to get used to it.
Yeah.
So that was ultimately what I was doing. Yesterday was my big day.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, good job with that. Do we have did they give results for that yet, or?
Tonight. So
tonight.
At 7 p.m. we get the answers for the, what's it called? Student awards ceremony. So
Nice. That's exciting. Are you nervous for that, or?
Fingers crossed. I am just looking forward for the feedback that I will be getting, because I'm also always looking for room for improvement.
Yeah.
Both my supervisor and a friend of my supervisor just came to me after, and they're like, "Oh, you're gonna win the President's Prize." And I'm like, "Don't tell me that. I will be happy getting whatever I get, but hopefully it goes well.
That's really awesome. Yeah. So, what are your big plans for the future? Like, you mentioned PhD, maybe.
Yes.
Is that a possibility, or like, what are your big goals?
So yes, PhD is definitely on the table, and it's funny. So both my supervisor and I, we drove from Montreal here, so it's a 12-hour drive. So there's
Wow.
long conversations,
Yeah.
and the topic of fast tracking into a PhD came up. I really like my project now. I really like what I do, and I am not necessarily someone. It's very common in academia to move around, right, and to go
Right.
from one university
Yeah.
to the next. And I tried. I interviewed. I met with supervisors from the West Coast and California, and everything seems super interesting, but I am just not the type of person to pack up my life and leave. I did it a lot when I was a kid, and I'm very happy in Montreal. I'm very happy staying close to home. And so we talked about the opportunity or the possibility of fast tracking, and we discussed ideas. And so, yes, the second I get back to McGill, back in my hometown, I am going to my department to submit the form to fast track and to roll up into a PhD. And so hopefully that will work out. And then
Nice.
I don't know, we'll see about the whole academia thing. I really like it. I think that it's super cool. I would like to go into teaching, so one thing at a time, then we have to do a postdoc. But for now, PhD, but hopefully one day I will have my own lab like my supervisor does. That
Nice.
is
Yeah.
my dream.
That's the dream. Yeah. And how about any fun trips or anything that you want to go on?
So that's also very interesting. So my best friend, who I met taking that course that I said with the two really cool teachers, biology teachers that happen to be entomologists, we met at that school, and so we've been friends for, oh my god, like 7 years now. And we did our undergrad together at the same university, everything, graduating
Nice.
at the same time. When I went into my master's, she took a break, and so she is currently living in Spain, of all places, and she
Wow.
is just so cool. She traveled all over the planet. I am so impressed by her. I'm just like, I can't believe, just like, I'm so proud of her. So because she's living in Spain, obviously, I'm like, well, can you stop traveling everywhere you go? Obviously, I will spend money to come and see you. I can't like live apart from you for too long. So my next trip is currently in Spain, where we're going to do a whole Europe trip. So we're going to do the Dolomites in Italy, the Camino in Spain, a bit of Switzerland. So that's my next trip that I'm planning for
Nice.
next summer.
Very
and then
fun.
also Phoenix, Arizona for ESA next year for sure.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So, lastly, before we wrap this up, where can the viewers go to learn more about you and the work you're doing? If you have social media or maybe a website or anything like that, yeah, where can we go for that?
So absolutely. So I'm still pretty early career. In order to have a website, so you can find more information about my lab and what I do at lymanlab.ca, and so I am listed there. You could always email me on my McGill email, so stephanie.gagnon2@mail.mcgill.ca, and also on Instagram at stephanie.ggn.
Awesome. Alrighty. This was so fun. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Likewise. Thank you.
You are obviously super passionate about this. So, yeah, thank you so much. This was really fun.
Oh, this was so fun. This was my first experience doing a podcast. I feel honored. I love what
and you
guys
killed
stand
it. You
for.
did great.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Lil Dudes Insect Academy podcast. If you enjoyed it, definitely consider dropping a follow on whatever platform you're listening on. And also, Lil Dudes Insect Academy is a non-profit organization. So if you're passionate about science communication, entomology, outreach, and education, and you enjoy what we're doing and how we're solving that gap, then consider heading over to our website and donating there, or becoming a monthly donor via our Patreon, which is also linked in the show notes of this episode. Yeah, so share this episode with one of your friends, and tune in next week. I will see you all next week, and with that, keep on bugging.